Poirot. They'll hang me for this.
Not while I have the power to prevent it, monsieur.
Was Hercule Poirot based on a real person? And if so, who was he at the end of the day? Surely these questions pop into the mind of every reader of the fabulous series of the detective crime novels written by Agatha Christie in the mid-20th century. True masterpieces of the genre, these texts and their quirky protagonists have quickly become evergreen crowd favorites on bookshelves, on stage, on TV and in the movies, and seem to have never lost their popularity ever since.
You're probably working on some other book now, madame. Set in Egypt, perhaps?
How thrillingly clever of you to deduce that, Monsieur Poirot.
The Mysteries of Mystery, the Queen of Crime, or the Duchess of Death for fascinated readers, Missus and Nima for the dearest and nearest, Dame Agatha Mary Clarissa Christie Lady Malone is by far the most celebrated female detective genre writer who managed to make her fictional characters stand out from the book pages and almost live their own lives outside of their initial frames. Yet, could it be that Christie didn't just invent Poirot, or Poirot, as they used to pronounce his francophone surname in English?
Poirot, monsieur. Hercule Poirot.
Poirot. Could never get my tongue around French.
But I am Belgian, monsieur, not French.
In fact, Agatha Christie Malone did shed some light on this intriguing part of the character's creation herself. It was while I was working in the dispensary that I first conceived the idea of writing a detective story. She writes in her autobiography, by the way, an extremely captivating reading. I highly recommend it to you to unwind, brighten up the spirit and spend some hours of leisure talking to Mrs. Christie herself. Back to the story. Imagine this picture. The First World War is in full swing. Agatha is a young and joyful 20-something girl whose head is obviously engaged with all the romantic things a proper Victorian girl should be thinking of at this age, like country house parties, riding, hunting, dances and roller skating. And she's also carrying her duty of helping her country and its soldiers defending it. She works days and nights as a nurse at the local hospital and then moves on to the job at its dispensary unit, where they made drugs and prepared some complicated medical potions, mixing often dangerous substances to achieve the desired healing outcome. I was surrounded by poisons. Perhaps it was natural that death by poisoning should be the method I selected.
Do you not find it peculiar, Inspector, that this calculating murderer should be discovered with this very bottle of poison in his pocket?
She also has an additional motivation, the challenge to write a detective story proposed by her elder sister Madge, who was a decent author herself on her own merit, that Agatha naively accepted. "I don't think you could do it," said Madge. "They are very difficult to do. I've thought about it." "I should like to try." "Well, I bet you couldn't," said Madge. The words had been said, and now there was a favorable opportunity to prove the elder sister wrong. There would naturally have to be a detective. At that date, I was well steeped into the Sherlock Holmes tradition, so I considered detectives. Not like Sherlock Holmes, of course, I must invent one of my own, and he would also have a friend as a kind of butt or stooge. That would not be too difficult. Christie was thinking of Sherlock, the French criminal and detective in one person, Arsène Lupin, and several others, when suddenly an idea came to her head.
Yes, let's make a little pause to freshen la toilette. And to rest the little grey cells.
Then I remembered of Belgian refugees. We had quite a colony of Belgian refugees living at the parish of Tours. A good many of them were suspicious peasants, and the last thing they wanted was to be asked out to tea or have people drop in upon them. They wanted to be left alone and to be able to keep to themselves. They wanted to save money, to dig their garden and to manure it in their own particular and intimate way. Why not make my detective a Belgian? she thought.
You're not selling onions, are you?
Pardon?
Your people come over here doing that a lot.
There were all types of refugees. How about a refugee police officer? A retired police officer, not a younger one.
Superintendent Boucher, one moment if you please. Chantalier and myself, we would be very happy to investigate further the Deroula case.
Although she later regretted making Poirot this mature, even old, right from the beginning. In The Mysterious Affair at Styles, set in about 1916 to 1920, we learn that Poirot retired at the age of 55 in 1905. So already in the first book, Poirot is somewhere in his late 60s.
She has kindly extended her hospitality to 7 of my country people who are refugees from our native land.
What a mistake I made there! The result is that my fictional detective must really be well over 100 by now. A couple of books later, Christie recognized this misfortune and never spoke about his age again.
You got it wrong, you bloody little frog!
Firstly, I am not a bloody little frog. I am a bloody little Belgian.
Anyway, this is how she personally remembers the creation and the real-life prototypes of Poirot. I settled on a Belgian detective. I allowed him slowly to grow into his part. He should have been an inspector, so he would have a certain knowledge of crime. He would be meticulous, very tidy, I thought to myself, as I cleared away a good many untidy odds and ends in my own bedroom. I could see him as a tidy little man, always arranging things like things in pairs, like things square instead of round, and he should be very brainy, should have little grey cells of the mind. That phrase she particularly liked and was happy about. In some of the books she would later specify that he spent his childhood years in or near the town of Spa, the quiet retreat in Ardennes in Belgium. He must have come from a large yet not so wealthy family and had at least one younger sister. Amusingly, the citizens of another Belgian village of Elzel in the province of Hainaut somehow decided that Poirot has been born there, and although Christie has never mentioned that anywhere in her texts, they even have a copy of Poirot's birth certificate in a local memorial attesting Poirot's birth, naming his father and mother as Jules-Louis Poirot and Godelieve Poirot. What a devotion, isn't it?
Abduction, addiction, adultery, see also under marriage, bigamy, see also under marriage, bonds.
See also under marriage?
When it comes to the name, there are numerous suggestions out there on the internet of how she actually came out with it. Christie herself noted that she was indeed in search of something original. He would have rather a grand name, one of those names that Sherlock Holmes and his family had, like Mycroft Holmes, Sherlock's brother, for example, or Enola from the recent series.
Oh! Apologies, madame. I meant no disrespect.
Oh, you could try to mean a little.
Well, she was apparently looking for some catchy contrast or controversy that would stick in the reader's mind. How about calling my little man Hercules, a name of a giant, a god attached to a small man? How do you like it? Christie remembered that the search for the last name was more difficult. I don't know why I settled on the name Poirot. Whether it just came to my head, or whether I saw it in some newspaper or written on something, anyway, it came. At that point, she decisively omitted the last S from Poirot's name, transforming it to the appropriate equivalent, Hercule, suitable for the Belgian detective. There was another childhood recollection of Christie that sheds light on some famous traits of the eccentric detective. Mother read me Dickens aloud, and we both enjoyed it. Our first Dickens was Nicholas Nickleby, and my favorite character was the old gentleman who courted Mrs. Nickleby by throwing vegetable marrows over the wall. Can this be one of the reasons why I made Hercule Poirot retire to grow vegetable marrows? Who can say? The rather disturbing seasickness was another personal trait of Christie that she shared with the Belgian detective.
Don't you think that human beings tend to reproduce certain patterns, Mr. Poirot? Stereotyped patterns?
Précisément, mademoiselle.
Few details about Poirot's personal life would be revealed in the future books, apart from the rather vague idea of his work as the chief of police of Brussels until the Great War forced him to leave for England. And although this man has never existed in real life, people kept saying they've certainly seen the prototype. For example, one genealogist in Torquay, the town in Devon where Christie spent her childhood years, well, he was sure he might have found the real deal. He dropped the name of Jacques Ornay, a retired Belgian gendarme who fled the war and settled in the community of refugee Belgians in Torquay. Monsieur Ornay was reportedly present at a charity event organized in the town to raise money and clothing for Belgian refugees, and a young girl played the piano there. And the girl turned out to be Agatha Christie, who must have remembered the guy. Although this proves nothing, it is indeed looking like a fancy coincidence.
Oh, Mr. Poirot, how pleased I am to see you.
Moreover, Christie herself noted that twice in her life she saw Hercule Poirot, once lunching in the Savoy and once on a boat in the Canary Islands. The character of Hercule Poirot became quite a success in the writer's own words, right from the first novel, The Mysterious Affair at Styles. No wonder that Agatha Christie continued to employ him for 55 years. As a result, Poirot became the leading character of 33 novels, 2 plays, and more than 50 short stories. Interestingly, he became living his own life right from his first appearance over 100 years ago in 1920. Much to Christie's protest, editors of various publications and stage and movie directors often added their own twist to his looks and personality. Much rarely, in some cases, those interpretations turned out to be right to the point. For example, the editor of the famous and popular sketch weekly journal commissioned Christie to come up with a series of detective short stories. She remembered, he also had a fancy drawing made of Hercule Poirot, which was not unlike my idea of him, though he was depicted as a little smarter and more aristocratic than I had envisaged him. Interestingly, my favorite and I believe the best ever incarnation of Poirot, performed by the great David Suchet, is also inclining towards this flair of sophisticated manners with a twist of peculiarity and irresistible power of intellect. They say that David Suchet was recommended for the part by Christie's family, who had seen his theatre performance. I have to tell you, I think my mother would have been very proud. Rosalind Hicks, Christie's only daughter, once said to Suchet in private,
"How is the sleuthing going? With eminence and discretion? No one to put the hand grips on?"
Not yet.
Yet that isn't the case for every Poirot portrayal. It always seems strange to me that whoever plays Poirot is always an outsized man, recalled Christie. The great British actor Peter Ustinov immediately comes to my mind. He did 6 episodes from the series from the late 1970s to the late 1980s, to the rather plausible critical acclaim. And Kenneth Branagh from the recent movie remakes of Murder on the Orient Express, Death on the Nile, and soon some third film based on a lesser-known work, definitely makes it into the top 3 most accurate and deep portrayals of the detective on screen. In the next video, we'll have a look at all Hercule Poirot actors and choose the best fit for the role. Subjectively, of course.
Stamps, please.
Very good, sir.
Hastings?
Good Lord. Monsieur Poirot!
It is indeed mon ami Hastings!
And how about Captain Hastings? Could it be that he had a particular inspiration from the epoch? In her autobiography, Christie said that although she particularly enjoyed Hastings, he was still a stereotyped creation that perfectly fit into his and Poirot's detective team. I was still working in the Sherlock Holmes tradition, eccentric detective, stooge assistant with illustrated type, Scotland Yard detective, Inspector Japp, and now I added human foxhound, Inspector Giraud of the French police. Giraud despises Poirot as being old and passé. She recalled the thought process for the famous murder of the Lynx, which was in fact based on a real-life case. I'll tell its story in one of the future videos.
I can build a house of cards 7 stories high by placing one card on top of another with a mathematical precision. But I cannot find the last link in this so mysterious case.
Anyways, even authors grew tired of their own creations. Christie mentioned that she even wanted to marry Hastings, the sooner the better, and this way get rid of him, at least for a while. She eventually got bothered by Poirot too, and already in the 1930s found him insufferable, and by the 1960s called him an eccentric creep. Perhaps this attitude was fueled by her continuous efforts to keep his personality the way she intended, with numerous theater and movie directors tried to change his character and appearance this or that way to make him younger, prettier or funnier to suit the tastes of the public, well, as they daringly saw it.
God damn you. What have you done?
What have I done? It is you who have deceived me!
No wonder Dame Agatha Christie has never cared much for cinema or for wireless and television and remained that proper Victorian girl up to the last days of her fruitful life. The characters she created made her the best-selling novelist in history. Eventually, they went far beyond the written text and keep inspiring new takes on them in movies and TV and even in books by new authors. Poirot even became the first fictional character to have an obituary in the New York Times, following the publication of The Curtain, the last novel about this detective where he dies, which happened the same year Agatha Christie passed away herself. Well, obviously, this is not my last video with the true stories behind Agatha Christie characters. So I would be happy if you decide to stay and explore my channel and subscribe not to miss the next episode coming. Bye!
It was nice to talk. Bonne nuit.
Good night.